We are live on YouTube. So I know there's a little bit of delay on YouTube when I actually started versus what's actually in the feed. So my mic's working, everything's good. What's up, everyone? Like I mentioned before, anyone on IG, go ahead, hit the link to my YouTube. I'm trying to funnel everything there. That's where everything's going to be archived, going to be stored. I'm just going live on IG to let people know that I'm live. And I'll eventually, uh, my internet connection should be good enough, but eventually might be streaming to Twitter and Facebook as well simultaneously. So that's the cool thing about the software, streaming software I'm using, is it allows me the opportunity, the ability to stream on multiple different platforms. But obviously, that comes at a cost. Depends on your internet speed, and my laptop should handle it. But it's all dependent on my internet speed because typically the frames per second that each of the streams run stacks up on top of each other. So I want to make sure the quality is still really good. So that could be something possibly in the future just to broaden my reach to multiple different audiences. But like I said, main place will be here on YouTube. All right, but let me see a couple updates. Juneteenth today, so luckily I had the day off. Just kind of took it easy, nice and easy. Went to the gym, sat by the pool for a little bit, got caught up on a little bit of reading, got caught up on stuff, and yeah, back to the work week tomorrow. So work's been pretty busy the past couple weeks, so luckily a lot of things have kind of wrapped up and finished project wise. So hopefully it's not going to be as stressful. And let's see. Oh, I had a couple new pickups. Went to the bookstore, Pioneer Book. There's like a 40% off sale they were doing. And I picked up a bunch of books. I might regret taking this out because I'm just gonna have to put it back in this bag. There's no way I'm gonna finish all these books before I actually move, which I'm moving in about a month to Texas. All right, let's see if I can grab these. Don't worry, I'm not gonna go through necessarily all of these, but a bunch of business books. So maybe in the future in the future I was actually thinking of potentially doing book reviews live or video format and posting on YouTube. I think that's super beneficial because I read a lot of books. I've been kind of stuck on one book recently just because the nature of it, more of the business heavy books with the case studies and case examples of different companies doing different things. This one specifically about strategy. They're a little bit harder to read and not super enjoyable or as enjoyable as the others like self-help books. So those take me a little bit longer to read just because I can usually read 30 minutes to an hour of those without getting super bored. And there are super really good information, but like I said, you kind of have to take in doses. But if you were to look at my book reading list, I've read a good amount of books, but there's probably like 100 plus books left on that list. I might share it in the future, but I was able to pick up like 8 of them. So super nice, and they're all 40% off. So Random Walk Down Wall Street, Unwind. So a couple of these are like psychology books, Predictable Revenue, and basically where I get a lot of these book suggestions are from other entrepreneurs, people in business. A lot of these are business psychology, self-help books, marketing as well. So people on YouTube, people on social media, kind of the people I look up to business wise. I take a lot of ideas and a lot of books that they recommend, and I write them down on this list. So this is a few of them: Rich on Any Income, Blind Spot. So this is actually recommended by my one of my ethics teachers, which that was one of my favorite classes, business ethics. Talks about, I believe, cognitive bias and how to get rid of that. And then Freakonomics. I'm sure everyone's heard of this one. Good to Great by Jim Collins. There's another book by Jim Collins that Patrick Bet David really likes. It's the How the Mighty Fall or something like that, and I wasn't able to find that unfortunately. And this one I actually wasn't looking for. It's Jab 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 Right Hook by Gary Vee. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with Gary Vee. It's about social media marketing, and in particular social media, growing your social media presence. So I thought it was really interesting. I didn't have that on my list, but I definitely know his philosophy. I'm a big fan of that philosophy of it's basically just give value, for whatever business that you're running, specifically in social media, and then you give some more, and then you jab one more time, and then right hook. So then you start selling stuff. So I'm a big fan of that philosophy, and it's kind of how I'm running my social media and possibly future business model. So we'll see how that works out. But I bought all those books, and yeah, for all those books it was like $50, a little bit under $50. So it wasn't bad, and I have still a ton of books up on my bookshelf that I still need to read. So books that I need to read is probably like 20, 25 books. So I'll slowly get there. But once I finish this strategy book, which I'm a little bit past halfway now, I've been on that for the past couple months. Anyway, but in the future, I actually might do some book reviews. I think will be really interesting. All right. Sorry, enough of the intro. Let's go ahead and hop into the topic. Was college worth it? So specifically me, I mean, I'm repping my alma mater. It's weird to say that I'm an alumni and an alma mater now of BYU, but it's a big accomplishment. I'm glad I'm done with it, just because school was great. I enjoyed every minute of it, but also came a lot of not great stuff like homework and projects and the less enjoyable stuff. But there was a lot of enjoyable stuff as well, and I'll kind of go over kind of like the pros and cons of college. It's the reason kind of I'm talking about this is there's big widespread throughout social media and the mass media and people just talking. They're like, oh, you don't need to go to college, you don't need a natural education, you don't need to do all this formal stuff, you don't need to pay someone to gain experience and stuff like that. And I guess generally it just depends on your point of life, what you want to do with your life. And the thing is, a lot of kids don't know what they want to do, so you're going to end up spending, even if you don't go to school, don't go to college, you're going to be spending several years figuring out what it is that you do want to do. So it just depends. If you're someone that, for example, I always relate to one of my old roommates that he hated school, he hated doing homework, he hated doing projects, he hated sitting down. He had ADHD and stuff like that, so he was always wanting to do stuff with his hands, build stuff with his hands, create something. For that person, that type of people, then college and postgraduate school, secondary school is probably not the best option for you. So he went to he didn't go to trade school, but he basically runs his own construction remodeling business right now. I think he's getting licensed to be a general contractor too, so he can do a little bit more project wise with construction and building. But for him, that was kind of the good path. And he started his own business and everything like that, and he just immediately start making money. Whereas for the person who, and the cool thing, the great thing about getting an education is it's still fairly well valued by corporations and people in general. If you have someone, and if you look at the statistics as well, it's like typically people that don't go on to postgraduate, so after high school, additional education, then their lifetime earnings is so much lower than someone that even just gets their bachelor's or associate's degree. And most of that is due to kind of like the work ethic and the diligence of the people. Typically, people that just finish high school or don't finish high school and don't pursue on typical. This is obviously not all people, but on average, most of those people aren't super driven. So they're not the ones that have ADHD and want to start their own business and be super successful as that. In that, they're typically just people that just work a job, paycheck to paycheck, content with life, and just normal average people. But there's a lot of benefits to college and post-secondary education. So first we're going to talk about money. Obviously, when you think of if anything's worth it, you think of how much is it going to cost monetarily, financially, and is it going to yield a result that you basically profit off of what you put in. So, and that's a big topic nowadays because college is crazy expensive, especially if you're going to private, out of state. BYU is very much the exception to that, just because it is subsidized a lot by the tithing that we pay in our church, which is great, which is awesome. I love world class education for for pennies on the dollar, you know? But people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education when in reality, and, and the major they pick is really important to their future earnings as well. And I'll go over that probably at the end. But first thing I want to talk about is money. So let's see. Make sure this is on the right screen. So I have a couple things. So I'm going to go over like how much college tuition costs per year on an average sense, how many people actually graduate in a certain amount of years, within 6 years, within 4 years, books and supplies. Because the thing is, college isn't just tuition. A lot of people like to focus on tuition. Obviously, that's the main bulk of what you pay for a college education. But you have books and supplies, you have rent, basic living expenses. You also have student loans if you're in the position where you want to pursue education, but you don't have the means to pay for it up front or as you go, then there's going to be costs associated with that as well. So we're going to go into all of that. We're going to first hop into college tuition costs per year. So I'm going to go flip over to my screen. Oh, I'm not sharing anything right now. So let me switch this. All right, perfect. Yeah. So this is US News report, average college tuition 2022 to 2023. I'm just going to make some highlights. So obviously the big thing is private institutions, private colleges. This is on a annual basis. So think of it as I'd like to think of it as 2 semesters. So for an entire year of college. All right, how much college tuition costs per year? Private institutions, roughly around 40K per year. Public out of state. So I guess examples of private institutions. BYU is an exception. It does not cost that much per year. It costs like literally pennies on the dollar. Says the average. You think of like a Notre Dame, or you think of a, a Northwestern, or you think of a Stanford. Those are private institutions, private colleges, universities. BYU is like $6,000 to $7,000. So, like I said, a fraction of that price, which is amazing. And public out of state. So if you think of UVU, Utah State, University of Utah, if you're coming from, I'm from Texas. So if I were to come from Texas, I've had friends that go to UVU. So initially, if they didn't have in-state tuition, which I believe is, I think you have to live in the state for a year, have a residence in the state for a year in order to qualify for in-state tuition. For so out-of-state tuition, around 23 grand a year. And then public in-state tuition. So that's if you're from Utah, you go to the U, or you go to Utah State, or you go to UVU, or in my case, if I went to a Texas school, if I went to UT, if I went to Texas Tech, or went to Texas State, or let's see, yeah, well, any of those schools, then, or no, Oklahoma, it's out of state. But if I were to go to any of those schools, Stephen F. Austin, then I'd be paying around 10K per year, which actually isn't too bad. So if you are going to go to college, unless you have a scholarship for an out of state college, or you go to BYU or somewhere, a private institution that is very affordable, very cheap, then I would recommend staying in state of public school. All right, so that, and then this is per year. So if you kind of multiply this out by 4 years, according to what the US News says, it's roughly 160K for these private schools, 92K for public out of state for 4 year degree if you go 2 semesters each year for 4 years, and then public in state is around 40K. So the next article data I want to go over. Now, there's a ton in here. I'm not going to go over everything. Just gonna I read through everything. I'm gonna highlight stuff, and if, as always, I'm gonna put all the stuff in the description if anyone's interested in looking at it. But average cost of college and tuition. This is done by the Education Data Initiative. So, kind of some highlights I took from this were it breaks down kind of similar to U.S. News annual cost of college, if it's public, if it's private, in state, out of state, whatnot. And the numbers are a little bit different, obviously, but relatively the same. Some of the numbers I thought were really interesting is like 60.9% of confirmed bachelor degree earners graduate within 6 years. 6 year average cost of attendance, 207 grand. Granted, that might be, I don't know exactly if that's across just an average or median across private and public, in state, out of state. I'm not exactly sure. But the important number is like the 60.9%. So that's actually me. I took 6 years. So my college journey was I did a year of school before I went on my church mission to Japan for 2 years. So I did a year of school. I was planning on undergrad majoring in geology. So kind of wanted to do petroleum geology, kind of similar to petroleum engineering in a sense, which is very lucrative and very good career, very volatile as well. But I'll get into that maybe at a different time. I did that for a year and then I came back from my 2 year mission and then I did that for also another year. And kind of in the last semester of my second year, I was kind of debating, like, I don't know if I really want to do geology just because it wasn't really what I was passionate about. And it was interesting and I knew I could make a lot of money but in that industry, but it didn't really excite me just because most likely I had to go to grad school, so I would have had to do graduate school another 2 years, more money, and had to write a thesis and all of that. And I wasn't super psyched on doing that. I wasn't super passionate, like I said. And then I actually switched to business. So in order to get into the business school, just because it's a pretty competitive program, a pretty competitive school within BYU, you have to apply to get in order to apply, you have to take certain classes. So I basically started over as a freshman at the end of my sophomore year. So another 4 years later, I finally graduate in finance in the business school. So I'm part of that 60.9%. And then it's about right here 39.8% of bachelor degree students graduate within 4 years. So that's not that many. So 40%. So yeah, 4 out of every 10 students, 1 out of every 5 graduate within 4 years, which is the traditional of time period of when people actually graduate. But like I said, people change majors. I changed my major, and there's even a percentage of that don't even graduate at all. So they go to many years of school, pay all this money, and end up not graduating. So don't be that person. But there also is the sunk cost fallacy, where if there is something that is worth your time and will pay you for not continue with school for the last couple years or something like that, then it might be worth it to drop out of school and do that. All right, so I wanted to focus on that. Just the percentages of people who graduate when books and supplies. I talked about tuition, the average cost of tuition, books and supplies. You have to take that into account as well. It's not just tuition that you're paying for college, but it's books and supplies. So 2021, 2022 academic year average student spends between, I'd say this is pretty accurate, 600 to like 14, $1,500 in books and supplies. So there's been semesters, especially my freshman year, easily 600, 700, $800 on textbooks just because they're required and they're fat textbooks and they're each like 150 to $200. And most of the time it's very difficult to find those new because they always tell you to get the updated version of whatever textbook, which is kind of a scam in my idea. But now they're selling online versions of those books for like half the price, but still they're raking in the dough for that. But then there's also been years where I haven't spent like anything. I maybe spent like $10 or $50 or something like that. But I'd say for the average person, I'd say that's fairly accurate. All right. And cost of room and board, I'll kind of go into that. And I'm actually going to kind of run me and my finance mind. I love Excel and spreadsheets. So I'm actually going to kind of like do a rough estimate of how much it would cost and then also factor in if you're working and stuff like that. But for people that have to take out loans, which I would say, I don't know the exact percentages. I probably should have looked it up, but I'd say, let me actually look that up real quick. So percentage of students that have student loans. Percentage of college students that have student loans. Let's see. Education Data Initiative again. Or it has telling me the total amount. And like the average amount that people have. I don't think it's giving me a number for the percentage of students that actually borrow money for school. Okay, 55% of okay, cancellation. All right, it's going to like debt, this federal student debt freeze and stuff like that. All right, well, I can't find a percentage right now, maybe later, but I was interested in what the interest rates for a lot of these loans are because with any loan you take out, there's going to be some sort of interest rate that you have to pay on top of the principal that you borrow out. And this is literally from studentaid.gov, so like the place where you apply for FAFSA and loans and grants and all that from the federal government. And I know there's a bunch of different things with like the student loan, like freeze and possibly cancellation of that. So I know interest levels have changed, but this is kind of the rates I've found on this website. So anywhere from 5.5%, and just depends on what kind of student you are and a couple different other factors, but anywhere from 5.5% to 8% interest, which when you add that up, say you take say you just go to a public out of let's just do a public in-state tuition. So you're spending 40K. So let's just say you take out total of 40K. You're spending 5%, at least 5% interest, if not maybe 8%. And this is fixed. So that's the nice thing. It's not variable, so they can't change it on you, but still. Right now interest rates are pretty high. So it's not like it was in COVID when you could probably got it was probably like 1% interest or something like that. All right, looks like my mom's helping me out. 42 to 55% at public 4 year, 57 to 68% of private 4 year. I guess those are the percentages of students, whether public or private schools they're attending, that take out debts, take out student loans to pay for their school. Which that's why I probably would have said I would probably say like 50-50. Luckily, and I'll go over like my situation, what happened in my case at the very end. But think about that: 5% over the lifetime of a loan. It adds up, and I'll go over a lot of the numbers as well. But I think that's really useful knowledge to have. And I was now this is kind of skimming on to the next part, but I kind of basic assumptions: rent and basic living expenses, $400 to $800 a month. I think that's reasonable depending on where you live in the country. Food, $200 to $400 a month. I think that's reasonable as well, just generally across the nation. Transportation, $100 to $200 a month. I mean, like gas, and if you have a car. If you don't have a car, it's like bus, train, Uber, whatever you use, and car maintenance as well. But then that's even more if you have a car payment, and car payments now are ridiculous. They can be up to $1,000 a month, depending on the type of car you get and the interest rate that you have on it. But start to add up, and maybe you factor in working a little bit, 20 hours a week, $15 an hour. Multiply that by two to get a month's worth, and $600 a month. You're pulling in an income, but that barely covers your rents, not including anything else. So it's tough as a college kid. Um, Actually, let me see. I can pull up an Excel sheet. I want to make sure this shares as well. All right, let's do this. All right, you can see my Excel sheet. Awesome. I'm gonna go do some Excel work. No, I'm kidding. But so I'm gonna just move the mic over a little bit. Let's just say you attend. Let's just like do the middle option. All right, I'm from Texas. I'm attending UVU. So let's say out of state tuition. So I attend UVU out of state, and I'll do this per year and then multiply out. Let's just say I'm one of the was it 39%, 40% of people that graduate within 4 years. So let's just say just take 4 years, so a total of 8 semesters each, and just based off of kind of averages and medians, public out of state tuition is roughly 23K per semester. Semester. All right. And then let's just say, all right, let's just do this annually. Be a little bit easier. Okay. All right. That's tuition. And let's say books and supplies. So anywhere from what 600 to 1400. So let's just kind of take the middle of that. Let's just say I'm spending $900 on books and supplies per year. 900 bucks. And then I'm also on rent. I'm spending, let's say 600 bucks. I have a private room. So I'm living life a little bit nicer. It's about the 650. That seems more reasonable for a private room over here, just because I know rents in the market a little bit better here. Food, uh, 200 bucks is literally I am cooking all of my meals. I'm never eating out and stuff. So let's just say 350, 350, 325 per month for groceries and occasionally eating out. That's typical for a college kid. And transportation, let's just say I have a car and I'm spending like 100 bucks on gas a month. All right. So this is my expenses all added up. So this is annual. All right, 25K, almost 25K. Actually, let's say also I took out student debt, so interest. Let's just say interest. So over the course, actually I do this over the course of 4 years. Yeah, so actually forget I just did that. Sorry. So this is expenses per year, 25K. All right, and let's just say I'm working, so I have some income coming in. I work a job, typical college job, and make 15 bucks an hour, and I multiply that by, let's just say I work 20 hours a week during the school year, and let's just say school year is like what, 8 months out of the year. So multiply this by 4 to 4 weeks, and then by 8 months. I'm pulling that out, and granted, this is pre-tax. So if you really wanted to get nifty with it, maybe take out like 18 to 25% for taxes. Simplicity reasons, I'm not gonna do that. So during the school year, making roughly 9,600 bucks, and then let's just say during summer, and even yeah, even that working 20 hours a week every month, every month for 8 months. It's hard work doing school. Let's just say 15. It's a little, let's just say 20. And let's just say you work that same job over the summer. So you're working 40 hours a week times, what is it, like 3 or 4 months? Let's just say 3 months times 4 weeks times 3 months. All right, make another 7 grand. So total income. All right, you're pulling in 16 grand a year. So obviously your income minus expenses, you're losing about 8 grand a year. So let's just say you'll pull out some loans. So let's just say 10 grand per year. So this is your loan. 10 grand per year, so a total of let's just say 40K you're pulling out. And say your interest rate is somewhere in the middle, just pick like 6%. I think that's fair. Six. Oh, great. Great. 6%. Great. All right, and let's just do probably cumulative interest by the end of the year. And this is over 4 years, so well, let's just say it compounds annually, so it's just 4 periods. All right, total. And this is just your total interest. So you're gonna roughly pay 9,600 bucks in interest plus the principal. So you mark that into, all right, and this is for the full 4 years. So let's just divide this by four. So you're paying 2,400 bucks in interest per year. So you're losing 10 grand, almost 11 grand per year. And even if you adjust this to say like, say you're making 20 bucks an hour. All right, it's a little bit better, but that's you working a lot. So you're working 20 hours per week for all of time you're in school, and then you're working 40 hours a week, basically the whole summer, in order to pay. And this is just, um, yeah, this is public out of state tuition. So, and then you're paying interest on top of that. So it's tough. It's tough as a college kid, and there aren't many jobs where you can make more than that. I guess if you do an internship, you might get a little bit paid a little bit more, maybe like 25. So maybe then you're breaking a little bit even on that. But that's if you're assuming you're making 25 even during the school year as well. So it costs to be a college kid, and it costs a lot of money, and that's if you're just working all the time too, which I'd probably say majority of people probably aren't. They might be working during the summer, but I can guarantee you most people aren't working 20 hours a week during the school year, throughout the whole school year. All right, and so that's kind of the costs, what it looks like. If anyone has any specific questions, you can leave in the comments and I'll be able to answer. You can shoot me a DM on anything in specific, but that's kind of like a rough breakdown of how much it would cost. So I guess total costs, sorry, I didn't do the total cost. So let's just say total costs, this per year plus this. That's per year. So around 27 grand, including the interest from the loan. Let's just multiply this by four to do your, let's just say if you graduate in 4 years. So it's going to be 109K to graduate. It's a pretty penny, especially for a college kid, if you're not getting any outside help. So is it worth it? So we kind of have the cost right now, and it's relatively reasonable. UVU is a relatively reasonable school, even if it's out of state. tuition, which you'll eventually get in-state tuition as well. So it even might be a little bit cheaper than that. I can imagine people that spend like 20K per semester, so like 40K a year. That is ridiculous. So they're paying a lot more for that. Probably to get the same degree that most people are. So let's just see if it worth it. So we know the costs. All right, what's the end outcome, and how much money can you make when you graduate? So let's look at those numbers. All right, sure I'm sharing the right screen real quick. Share my Excel. All right, average salaries of college graduates out of college 2023. So this sorts it by degree. Like I said, obviously you make more on average, median as well, the more education you have. Just kind of how it works. I think that's like the number one indicator of how much you'll make is your education level, which obviously statistics do spell that out and do say so. That doesn't mean, in my personal opinion, that doesn't mean everyone needs to get a doctorate degree just because I think the ultimate time you put in and the money that you put in for earning a lot of those degrees, especially the graduate and doctorate degrees, depends on what path you take, but genuinely, I don't think they're worth it. At least in my sense, just because that's not what I want to do. But let's look at average salary by major. So here's on according to Forbes, 2022 average starting salary. You got probably across all of these, obviously, like the engineering and the computer sciences and business are going to be kind of like the ones that make the most, as well as STEM. Anywhere from it's kind of bumped up. Typically, the average back in a couple years ago probably it was like 50K for a college graduate. Now it looks like it's around 60K, depending on what degree you get. So, and like I said, depending on what degree you get, and I'll go into at the end what degrees are worth it, what degrees aren't worth it, because there are a lot of degrees that are not worth it. Like to be totally frank, in my opinion, humanities degrees I think are completely worthless. Like, yeah, I guess you want to if you want to be a social studies teacher, if you want to be like a professor, and then you eventually have to get your doctorate if you want to be a professor, say in a university or college. And then for a lot of times, graduate degree, if you want to teach like high school or anything like that, I don't think it's worth it just because maybe the pension's really good, but you have to work all that time, you have to do all that schooling, and you're probably making like top. This is after like tenure and everything, probably like 100, like six figures, 100K, 120K maybe. But that's after like 30, 40 years of being a teacher, which is insane. But I'll discuss that a little bit later. But it's interesting to see. All right, so average person, let's just say 60K. So kind of looking at back the Excel sheet. I'm not going to go back to it, but think of 109K. All right, 60K, kind of with your living expenses, probably going to take you anywhere from like, if you're borrowing all that money, like 5-ish years, 5 to 10 years, depending on how you break up the payments to pay it off. So, and that's just the average, just coming out of school. I'll get into like the degrees that are a little bit more worth it. They have higher total career earning potential. Oh yeah, I wanted to also share the highest paying majors from 2023. Highest paying majors, as you can imagine, they're all pretty much engineering at the very top, analytics, economics, finance, that's what I studied, math, nursing. So, see right here, it's business, or first of all, it's STEM, engineering, business, and that's pretty much it. Nowhere on here do you see humanities or like education or something like that. So, keep that in mind. So a lot of these engineering, chemical engineering, computer science, aerospace engineering, electrical engineering. Like as you can see, engineering's obviously the way to go. And even though I'm biased, I studied finance and business. When I get to it, I think actually let me go ahead and just talk about it right now. I think it kind of follows the natural path of everything. So kind of the top, if you are going to go to college, if you are going to get a degree, these in my opinion, are the ones that are worth it. and I'll go into kind of all the other ones that aren't worth it. So, number one, Kevin O'Leary says this all the time: engineering, engineering, engineering. Now, I actually was pretty good at physics, but to me personally, engineering is like not really interesting at all. If I went back and I could handle it and I actually enjoyed it, type of a thing, I would do engineering. I'd probably do some sort of electrical engineering or computer science or something like that. Computer engineering, if I could, if I had the intellectual ability and the mindset to do it, just because that paired with business acumen, like the sky's the limit for what you're able to do. Because you can build your own apps, you can build your own businesses. You're just insanely smart and can do it. But I can't handle engineering. I'm not that smart and I'm not that diligent. So number one, engineering. That's definitely, if you're gonna have a kid that goes to college and they're super smart and they can do it, tell them to do engineering. Second, and then obviously I'm a little bit biased with this just because it's my own personal major, finance, and I also put a little caveat with emphasis in accounting, just because knowing how money works within a business setting, with just in a generality setting, investments, it all comes with finance, and knowing how money works in today's society and everything. I think that's one of the most valuable skills that you can learn. For example, you can be the smartest guy on the earth. You can be the smartest engineer. You can be the smartest doctor. You can be the smartest lawyer. But if you don't know how money works and like how to manage your money and invest, then like no matter how much you make, it doesn't matter because you'll probably end up spending it anyway. So, finance, knowing how, because that's the lifeblood of how companies run, how they allocate money, how they allocate funds, managing costs, expenses, revenue, how to make more money, how to allocate that money. The whole performance of business revolves around that. And finance and accounting kind of run hand in hand. That's why I put it with an emphasis in accounting. And I put that as number three on my list of degrees that people should pursue if they're going to go pursue a degree. Accounting, just because that is the language of business. You can tell everything, pretty much everything about a business by looking at someone's financial statements and how they account for stuff. So, and if you're going to the path of tax accounting, is very, it could be very lucrative and it could be very important skill for your own business as well as other people's businesses that possibly might hire you or employ you. So accounting is number three. And then this is kind of like no order, but like I said, generally business and STEM. That's the focus. That's the degrees that are worth it, that lead to long term career, future career earning potential. Information systems. So it's basically like software engineering, computer engineering, all that within a business sense. So coding. Statistics, I think, is really important. That along with data analytics. I will say data analytics. A lot of schools are providing a major for that. What I've heard from a lot of employers, a lot of businesses, and a lot of companies, it's a really good skill to have, but it's not like necessarily the main skill that people want to see as your major. It's kind of like it was the shiny object like 3 to 5 years ago, kind of like how AI is now. So I think who knows, there might be schools offering AI degrees, but it's like that was the shiny object back then, and there's a lot of important skills that are in there, but it's not like necessarily a core skill that people are like, I'm hiring. There are data analytics roles in companies, but it typically is a great add-on, say for finance or accounting or information systems or supply chain or economics, to have the data analytic background. So I'd say better as a minor than a major. And then supply chain, so knowing how supply chains work. Think about what happened during COVID. It all was reliance. The companies that made it out alive and even thrived during that time were companies that had excellent supply chains. So I think having expertise in supply chain along with maybe a little bit other business skills, maybe a little bit of coding skill, you can go pretty far in your career. Economics, it's a general one. That's really good as well. Math, so kind of applied mathematics. This kind of goes along with engineering in a sense. So coming up with algorithms for models. A lot of the big banks, the big investing firms, they use a lot of math majors to come up with the algorithms for investing. So math is a good one. And then of course with engineering as well, it's really important. Marketing, marketing is always a really important one, just because sales are probably one of the most important things in a company. So first goes sales, then marketing. Sales is the act of actually selling to a person directly, usually, and then marketing is instead of going out to the people to sell them, people are coming into you to buy your product or your service. So marketing is very important as well. I mentioned data analytics as well. And then the last two are the med school route, law school route. So if you're wanting to become a doctor or a physician of some sort, then you're going to have to go to some sort of medical school or some sort of specialty school. This includes nursing as well. And it's always going to be around. People are always going to be sick. People are always going to need medical care. The thing is, with med school, it's a very lucrative business to be in, but you're going to sacrifice a lot of time up front, a lot of money up front, and you're going to have to really love what you do just because you're going to have to do your career for until you retire to kind of make it worth it. And the ultimate thing is to eventually like own your own practice or have your own practice. That's kind of where you make your own money and a lot of money instead of say work for a hospital or something like that. That way you actually you're basically your own business. So you have a stake in that business. You can sell that business possibly to other someone else and have an exit opportunity. So kind of that's med school route. Law school is kind of similar way, except I'm not a big fan of. I think it would be cool to be a lawyer or have a lawyer in the family. I briefly, so this is actually after I pretty much finished all my classes, but I was like, "Oh, you know what? It actually be pretty cool to be a lawyer after I heard some lawyers talk and stuff. But well, from what I hear about law school, it sucks, and I'm not willing to put that much time and effort into it, especially because they really focus on straight A's. You need to get straight A's, which is like, I mean, I know that's important. I get really good grades, but I find other stuff a little bit more important in life than just getting straight A's. And specifically lawyers, if you ever work with lawyers or familiar with lawyers, is they're all about billable hours. It's actually kind of a lot like consultants and accountants. They're all about billable hours. So if you even if you have your own law practice, it's like all billable hours, and you're just like the more you work, the more you make. Which I guess if you have a lot of lawyers under you, a lot of attorneys under you, or whatever, then you can rack up those billable hours. But from a you perspective, everyone only has 24 hours in a day. So if you can't really leverage like software or automation and you have to rely on man hours, people actually who are lawyers doing the work for you to make more money, I'm not a big fan of those business models just because it's not super scalable. You can hire more people, make more sales, make more money, but you're going to have to hire more people. They're going to have to work longer instead of becoming a little bit more efficient, utilizing, like I said, software, automation. That way, you can possibly even make more money in, say, other businesses where you're working less, but you make more money just because you optimize everything. You're becoming a little bit more efficient. You don't have to rely on physical people doing physical work in order to make more money. So that's my 2 cents on that. So those are the degrees. I'm going to go over it again. Engineering as number one. Finance, emphasis on counting number three as well. Information systems, stats, supply chain, economics, math, marketing, data analytics, med school route, law school route if you're interested in that. Now, all the other majors, I'm sure there's a few I probably left out. If I left out any of the majors that do have pretty good career earning potential, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the description or one of my videos. Shoot me a DM saying, "Hey, you forgot this one." I'll shout you out or something. But pretty much in my mind, all of the degrees, I'm thinking of the humanities, the language studies. Like I talk to my dad all the time, and he majored in Japanese, minored in business. Every single time he says, "I wish I could go back and major in business and minor in Japanese instead," which is basically what I did. So, any type of humanities, like all this gender studies, like family life and all that, and it just depends like what your goal is. If your goal is to make lots of money and provide for a family, then that might not be the route to take. Granted, there are exceptions to the rule. There are many marriage and family counselors and relationship coaches or whatnot, coaches that build their own practices and make tons of money. They leverage social media and all of these other sources to build their practice. Those are the exceptions to the rule. The average person, the psychology majors, all of those, To be frank, I don't think they're really worth it just because you typically have to go to some sort of postgraduate degree or schooling, which is going to cost more money, possibly even a doctorate. And I'm not a big fan of that. You'll forever work for someone. You can't, there's not really a ton of opportunity to build your own business or whatever. Potentially there are, like I said, there's exceptions to the rule, but I'm kind of going by medians and averages and looking at stuff and data aggregately. So my 2 cents on degrees that are worth it, degrees that aren't worth it. I think you're kind of wasting your money with all those humanity degrees, just because look at the market, look how much you'll get paid to do stuff, your career earning potential. All right, can you provide a family for that? If you're looking to be the provider in your family, then if not, then you should probably look at something else. All right, now I'm going to talk about my case in schooling. So I kind of went over the average person going to an average school, the average costs and whatnot. So my case, I went to Brigham Young University. Like I said, tuition was very much subsidized by the tithing of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is awesome. And I was paying roughly on average. I know it's a little bit more nowadays, but when I started, it was a lot, definitely less. It was like in the 2 grand. So average it out around 3K per semester. I took 6 years to graduate just because I did, like I said, 2 years undergrad at geology, ended up switching my major, and then I had to do another 4 years to finish my business finance degree. So in total, 12 semesters, 6 years. Multiply that by 3,000 per semester, around 36K. Luckily, I had some scholarships that covered a good amount of that as well. And then I'm blessed to have my parents, specifically my mom. Shout out to her. I'm sure she's watching right now, but she helped me pay for a lot of that tuition as well. And that was kind of our deal that we had. She would help out with tuition, and then I would pay everything else. And then in the future, the goal is to make a lot of money, so I'll take care of her in the future as well. So that's kind of our unwritten agreement. And then I looked at living expenses this past year. I've pretty diligent about calculating, tracking all my expenses. So I actually spent like what 24K this past year, which is definitely I've spent the most money just because I'm going on trips and spending money on shoes, clothes, and enjoying the nicer things in life. So spent way more this past year. Years prior, I spent way less. So I averaged about out around 12K per year. So multiply that by 6 years, and that's living expenses anywhere from rent to food to travel to transportation, money for dates, all of that. 12K per year, I think that's a reasonable assumption. Over 6 years, that's 72K, which is I'd say a pretty typical for a college age kid to spend in a year. That doesn't have that much money. So in total, the 36K plus the 72K from living expenses is a total of 108K over the period of 6 years. And granted, like I said, 6 years, so sounds like a lot of money, but over 6 years is around 18,000 a year. So I thought I did pretty good. And with my earning potential, I'm not gonna fully disclose what I'm making, but I'm gonna be definitely making above the average. I think for finance, I said it was like 60K, which I'll be making definitely above that. I'll be making around what the engineers were said to be making. So that gives you a kind of a hint of what I'll be making. And I actually think they have the finance category kind of skewed because that's even on the kind of the lower end of what finance people actually make. Because you can do like investment banking or whatever, you make double what I would make with your bonus. But anyway, that's kind of off the point. If I have any engineer majors in here watching this, and you're recently graduated or you graduated, give me a rough estimate of what you're actually making. Just because, I mean, I do have a couple engineering friends and family. I haven't actually asked them how much they're making per se or a range, so I would love to know if the numbers on the website and the data were actually accurate or not. Roughly like 70, 75, 80K starting off straight from graduation, straight from bachelor degree. So 18K a year, that's not bad. And like I said, I also did summer sales during the 3 summers I was going to school. So not including my internship summer, which was last year. So that paid for a lot. And it's nice making 20, 30, 40K in one summer. So I'm one of those fortunate college students that everything was able to work out, leave college, graduate with a positive net worth. Um, I have around, I typically don't say this, and honestly, it's not that much. It's not super impressive, but I'm hoping to add a zero to this in the near future. My end of year net worth goal is to be around 80 to 100K. Right now, I'm around like 45 right now as my net worth, which for those of you who don't know what net worth is, it's basically your assets minus your liabilities. So it's not strictly the amount that's in your bank account or in all of your investments. You have to subtract any liabilities if you're in a contract for like housing or whatever, if you have a loan, student loan that you have to pay off, or you have any other debts, you have a car payment, you have a mortgage or whatever. It's subtracting all of those liabilities that you have from your assets, the actual cash and the investments, the market value of the investments that you have. But with my net worth, assets minus liabilities, 45 45K right now. So I'm hoping to get that to 80 by the end of the year, which we got 6 months to do. We got some damage to do. I'll be making more money with my new job, so we're hoping all that works out. So that's kind of like the monetary cost, and obviously this whole live is mainly about the monetary. Like, is it worth it? Looking at the numbers, for me, I think it was definitely worth it. So kind of this is my conclusion, my take that I come from having a college experience and a 6 year experience. So even if I did 4 years, would it be more beneficial to me? I'd probably I'd like to say I would probably be at like at my goal right now. I would be at 80K or maybe even 100K net worth. Because obviously I'd be working for the past couple of years. So even hopefully more than that, maybe like 150K. But besides the point, I think for me it was worth it just because the career path I want to take, the knowledge I was able to get in both geology and kind of that physical science realm, understanding physics and all of that, and chemistry, I think is having a base understanding of that is important, and going through the math, because I thought I was good at math, but I'm kind of average at math after going through a lot of those classes. And then transferring through a business degree, which is all numbers, all logic, all common sense, and making sure it's worth it, specifically in finance for people. I got a lot out of my college education, not from just the education, career earning potential, just because in finance it's very good earning potential, and on top of that, you throw in your own investing that you're doing on the side and own businesses that I hope to build in the future and be able to run my own business from a finance and forecasting perspective, looking at financial statements, understanding what they mean, learning how to project them, as well as I do, even for my job right now, I basically am running accounting for many, I won't disclose the number, but lots of money right now. So it's kind of cool to be able to do that kind of as a college age kid. But knowing all that information is super knowledgeable and just going to help my earning potential later on. So I'd say for me, it was worth it. For, like I said, someone like my old roommate that wasn't super good at sitting in a desk, looking at a screen all day, plugging, chugging numbers, working in Excel and all that stuff, probably wasn't the move for him. So he ended up doing a little bit more manual labor, a little bit more entrepreneurial side, blue collar side, I would say. It was worth it for him. And then there's people in between as well. So I'll probably have another live on kind of like the different ways of making money. I know my guy, the Unplugged Alpha, Rich Cooper, he has kind of like his 6 ways of people making money. And I think he is basically 100% accurate on that. So I don't think I necessarily have as much experience, obviously, as him. So he has a lot more credibility than I, but I might have a future live where I'm talking about potentially expanding your college education or whatever education or whatever business or job you're currently doing right now, and how you could potentially make that into your own business. Just because I think entrepreneurship is really cool, and they say the American dream was home ownership, but I agree with Patrick Bet David, and the real American dream is running your own business, running your own company, being an entrepreneur. So I'll leave it at that. As with everything, thanks for all the people that tuned in today. I actually had a pretty decent turnout. Subscribe to my YouTube, plug out to my socials right here, right there, oh, right there. I have to get used to this camera being flipped for YouTube. But subscribe to my YouTube, subscribe, follow my Facebook page, follow from my Twitter for active tweets. I try to be a little bit more active on Twitter than my other social medias, and then of course my Instagram. It's my main one. And shout out to my fitness Instagram as well, Buff Asian. Follow that as well for daily fitness stuff. And I guess this comes to the end. That's for everything. Trying to help you guys get stronger, smarter, healthier, wealthier. Appreciate all the support and continue support in the future. But catch y'all later, and stay good. Have a good Juneteenth. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. All right, I'll catch y'all later.